All right, man, peace. So, brothers, Juju Smith-Schuster is certainly someone to watch for a myriad of reasons. Not only for his almost non-pro level of skill on the football field, but also for his affiliations and his associations off of the football field. I see him making fast friends with Mr. Kobe Bean Bryant, and that always is a red flag for me because that tells me that he's going to be introduced to, if he has not already been introduced to, many of the lower levels of the craft. And of course, he's going to have to rise through them incrementally. And that brings me to another point. Many people don't understand that when these prominent athletes get introduced to certain concepts in the craft early on, they're made to believe that it's something that's going to be advantageous for their careers. And many of them are suckers for it because they're very lustful for fame. And Juju Smith-Schuster comes off to me as someone who's an attention monger and very lustful for fame, which would make him very prone to being seduced into things like the craft, Luciferianism, so on and so forth. But once again, he's somebody to watch. He sat down with Stephen A. Smith and Max Kellerman just before the Super Bowl, let it be known how toxic the Pittsburgh Steelers locker room was. And it's because two other Luciferians in his locker room, that being Antonio Brown and Big Ben Roethlisberger, were fighting for control of the overall team. At least that's how I understood it. So they're going to talk about it, and I'm going to chime in.
There's an agreement at this desk that this is a number one receiver, right? Regardless of whether or not he's playing with Antonio Brown, correct?
Well, he's definitely number one receiver. If you look at his numbers, he had number one receiver type numbers.
Correct.
Yeah. That is not on my mind right now. Go ahead.
That is not on my mind.
I think you're a number one receiver no matter who you, no matter
So do I, but that's not on my mind.
Well, it is on my mind a little bit because when I see you answer like questions about Antonio Brown, it's like, I hope Antonio Brown is back next year. And I imagine if I'm Juju.
In other words, Max Kellerman is saying that Juju Smith-Schuster is a phony, that he wants the spotlight and he wants the number one spot. And I pick up that same vibe. I think that Antonio Brown picked up that same vibe. Antonio and Juju did a pizza commercial a while back where they did one of those silly modern day dances that a lot of these young kids do. And when I watched the commercial, I said to myself, these two niggas are so phony. They know damn well that they view the other one as a threat. I even did a video about it pertaining to Antonio Brown and an earlier meltdown that he had during the NFL season, where even Shannon Sharp made it known that he saw the same thing that I was seeing, which is that the main reason why Antonio Brown was so upset was because he saw so much shine starting to go towards Juju. So many targets were starting to go towards Juju. And when you look at their numbers were basically equivalent.
Smith-Schuster, I'm thinking, am I ever going to fully get my credit if I'm always playing with this dude who, maybe the greatest receiver since Jerry Rice?
Agreed.
How do you feel about that?
I think I get my credit now. I think that, I built my own brand, my own self.
Now, brother, did you hear that? Juju said that he's built his own brand. He's only about 23 years old. So no, he has not built his own brand yet, but that shows you where his mind is at. His mind is on building his own brand. So in order to build a brand, he has to accrue fame. You get fame through attention and also by having doors open for you. The only way that you can get doors open for you in Hollywood and in the entertainment industry is to allow yourself to be initiated into the craft. So once again, watch him.
There's two sides. AB's here, I'm on the left side. We always call each other the 1-1 punch. There's never a 1-2 punch. I think you can have two number one receivers on the field. One controls this side, one controls this side. You talk about both receivers that have, first time in the franchise to have over 100 catches, over 1,000 yards each, and they're both competing. Why can't you have two number one receivers?
You can have that, but tandems like that often don't last very long because receivers by nature are rather selfish. So once again, you can have that, especially when the receivers are as talented as you and Antonio Brown. But we all know that receivers are almost like piranhas. They want to eat up everything, and when there's nothing left, they start to cannibalize one another.
I think, like you said, there's a 1-1 punch, and that's what we talked about. We never said we were at 1-2. It's always been a 1-1.
I'm not thinking about that at all. You can ball, you're an all-pro. We all know how big time of a talent you are. You represent the Steelers admirably. Nothing but love for you, but damn it, I got stuff on my mind. Juju Smith-Schuster, what the hell happened? How is it that the Steelers, the Pittsburgh Steelers, with a 1-1 punch, the 1-1 punch in you and AB, with Ben Roethlisberger, with James kind of filling in admirably for Le'Veon Bell, by the way. How in God's name? How in God's name did the postseason take place and y'all not be in it? How did that ever happen?
Very simple. The locker room has no discipline because the coach is not a disciplinarian. Mike Tomlin is what Terry Bradshaw always called him, which is basically just a cheerleader with a whistle. Nothing against Mike Tomlin. I think that he's a great coach, but I also think that he has personality flaws that are starting to show more and more. And then when you match that in tandem with the fact that their quarterback is overrated, he's on the other side, and he's not a leader, then your best overall player, Antonio Brown, is a malcontent. And then on top of that, the best all-around running back in the league, which happens to be a running back under your employ, Le'Veon Bell, did not report to camp all season. So when you mix all those four things together, those components together, that's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, the refs, nah. But for us, it's just been ups and downs, man. If you take away all the problems and situations we have going on in our locker room, just focus on the ball. I mean, against the Broncos, we had 500 yards plus, in yards, like a game we should have won. We blew the league against the Chargers. We fell short against the Saints, and we rely on another team to put us in the playoffs, which the Pittsburgh Steelers franchise definitely not allowed to do that.
Let me say this. Antonio Brown has not been perfect. He knows that. He knows how I feel about that. But I also do believe he's been getting entirely too much blame for what has been transpiring.
Well, that's because Big Ben Roethlisberger has played the political game very, very well. And I have to give him credit for that. Big Ben understands that if he just speaks kindly about Antonio Brown in the media and then steps back, he's going to allow Antonio Brown to make a fool of himself by being emotional. Big Ben knows that Antonio Brown cannot control his emotions. He knows that he has Antonio Brown caught up in a vortex of chaos, and he's just going to let Antonio Brown hang himself.
As a team, who is y'all leader? Hey, is it Big Ben Roethlisberger? Is it Mike Tomlin? Is it the combination of the two? Is it somebody on the defensive side of the ball? Who is the guy that y'all depend on to galvanize the troops? And did that person come up short this season?
Well, Stephen A., brother, it's pretty obvious that whoever the so-called leader is, or leaders are, they came up woefully short. Because the Pittsburgh Steelers arguably have the best talent from top to bottom in the entire NFL. When we look at the most talented rosters in the league, we're talking about Pittsburgh, we're talking about the Chargers, the Rams, the Houston Texans. But the reason why the Patriots get back to the Super Bowl and win more times than not is because they're so well buttoned up. Their coach is a genius, and the best player on their team is not necessarily the most talented player, but he's probably the best leader in all of football, that being Tom Brady.
I think, we have captains, yes, on the opposite side, defensive side, and,
Notice he said, yes, we have captains, but he did not say we have leaders.
Our captain, our offense speaks to us, the defense captain speaks to them, and Coach Thomas speaks to everybody, obviously, as a head coach, and, we rallied together and we fell short, and like you said.
In other words, we have guys on our team that have a C on their chest for captain, but we don't have any real leaders. Once again, pay very close attention to the fact that he made a distinction between the term captain and the term leader, because he knows that if he were to have answered Stephen A. Smith's question, he would have offended whoever it was who was deputized in their locker room to be considered the quote-unquote captain.
Those guys, at the end of the day, we're playing ball, and we lost against some good teams.
James Conner did fill in admirably, as Stephen A. said.
He was okay.
He's a good running back, but Le'Veon Bell is all universe, and what kind of an impact do you think it had on your season that you kind of just plucked that guy off the team and never got him back?
Well, here's the problem with that. At one point, the Pittsburgh Steelers were 7-2 or 7-3, whatever the record was, and they were basically shitting on Le'Veon Bell in the locker room, disrespecting him openly to the media, rifling through his locker, and making fun of the fact that they were going to take all his stuff. And then as soon as they started to turn downhill, all of a sudden the media and some of the members of the Steelers wanted to blame Le'Veon for their troubles or try to assign some of the reason to their faltering to his absence. No, it doesn't work like that.
Le'Veon Bell's a great player, don't get that wrong. Imagine having James Conner and Le'Veon Bell.
Like Antonio Brown and Juju Smith-Schuster.
That was smart of Juju Smith-Schuster. That's his way of saying, look, Connor is the one coming back with our team next year. So I'm not going to sit here and brag about a running back who's not going to be on the team next year in Le'Veon Bell. Yes, he was a great player, but he's gone.
Another 1-1 punch, definitely. I mean, the rotation between those two guys. And like I said, man, we have all the pieces to our puzzle. We get L Bell, we keep AB, those guys right there, and we just put them in. We focus on our main goal. What we love playing football is winning and winning the Super Bowl.
Do you feel that you didn't make the playoffs? Essentially, it came down to the fact that you didn't get Le'Veon Bell. You didn't have Le'Veon Bell on the roster this year, or?
Well, if we want to be literal about it, one of the main reasons why they did not make the playoffs is because of the mistake that Juju Smith-Schuster made near the end of their game against the Saints where he fumbled the football, if we want to get literal.
Do you believe that despite the individual parts that you have, maybe, just maybe, there needs to be a shakeup? That some people might need to go in order for this franchise to move in a forward direction. What's the mindset of you and the rest of your teammates right now?
Well, the mindset for me, I think James Conner filled that role. I think he played great this season to be.
Another reason why you guys like James Conner so much is because he's not going to demand as many passes out of the backfield as Le'Veon Bell did.
To be, only in his second year. For me, my person, like I said, man, let's keep the guys, let's focus on the main goal and just win the Super Bowl. There's nothing, let's stop all the
So we going to go from not making the playoffs to winning the Super Bowl. That's what we do?
Yes, that's what we're doing.
I'm not quite sure if that's happened before. Did those old St. Louis Rams teams, or that team in 2000, I believe it was, the greatest show on turf with Kurt Warner and Marshall Faulk, did they win the chip a year after not even making the playoffs? I'm trying to remember.
Happens in the NFL. I'm just saying, I'm just asking.
What's the conversation, though? Because the Steelers, we don't usually associate that franchise with drama. And a lot of it this season wasn't about the play. It was about all the drama. What are you guys saying now in the locker room to rectify that coming back next season?
I think everyone just needs to stop being divas. I think we need to stop being the Kardashians.
Right, but brother, when you say everyone, who are you really talking about? When you say, quote unquote, everyone needs to stop being divas or Kardashians, the only player who has been considered a diva on your team has been Antonio Brown. So if you have an issue with Antonio Brown, just say so. It's okay, but I get it. I know why you're not saying so. It's the prudent thing to act like you're his friend on TV when in reality you don't like him. But there's no way in the world that you're going to get on national television and use that term diva, which basically means someone who wants to be worshipped and wants to constantly be attended to, and not have people understand that you're talking about Antonio Brown.
Just play ball.
Amen. Are you including yourself?
And also Big Ben, by the way, but he's not going to shoot direct shots at his quarterback. But he's also referring to Big Ben because those are the two guys in the locker room who have caused the biggest dust up.
No, when you say we need to stop being divas,
I mean, you are from Southern California.
I'm from Southern California. I did go to USC. But being in that locker room, I've learned a lot.
Because you don't seem like a diva to me, so who's the divas?
Good question, Max.
I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot in that locker room, and I know that I would never want to be the problem to any franchise. That's all.
I will say that.
In other words, that was Juju's way of answering Max's question. I've learned a lot in that locker room, and I would never want to be a problem to another organization. So clearly the person that he's talking about is a wide receiver. Who else could it be but Antonio Brown?
I adamantly believe you and Antonio Brown should not be going. The fact of the matter is, 1-1, that's what it should be. To me, it would be absolutely asinine for the Steelers organization to get rid of Antonio Brown. My position has been clear. Work it out.
Yeah,
I'll give a damn what it is. Work it out.
Well, Stephen A. Smith, I have news for you, brother. The Pittsburgh Steelers have not won a championship in 10 years. The last time that they won, they didn't even have Antonio Brown. So I'm of the position that they would not be losing much when it comes to championship consideration if they were to let him go. Sometimes less is more. And I'm on record as stating that Antonio Brown is the best overall wide receiver that I've seen since Jerry Rice, in my view. But there's a chemistry problem between him and the quarterback. And we know that if they're forced to decide between Antonio Brown and Ben Roethlisberger, they're going to choose the quarterback. So you might as well let Antonio Brown go, see what you can get for him.
Position is great. You got a number one receiver. You can get draft picks. You can get cap relief. You can do all kinds of things if you move Antonio Brown.
You can't convince me I can find another Antonio Brown.
But he's a number one. He's not a number one in name because that's the best receiver they got.
I thought you said you liked him. I thought you subject him to excessive abuse, because if he's the only number one, then he's going to require triple coverage practically. And then he's not
for
going to
Antonio Brown, you can get a first-round draft.
And let me say there's no disrespect to Juju, but when he says that he and Antonio call themselves two number ones, that's a name only. Because, brother, you're not a number one receiver, or at least you're not considered a number one receiver by the majority of NFL defenses that are trying to create game plans to stop your offense. They're always going to consider Antonio the number one receiver while he's there. So it's only going to be when Antonio's gone that you get to experience what being a number one receiver is really like. And that means having to constantly be double teams.
A draft pick, you can get cap room to do other things you want to do.
Gotcha. I'm not letting no go in on Antonio.
I'm not letting me go either. I'm on this side.
Bullshit. You know you want that man going. Stop bullshitting, Juju.
That's right.
All right.
That is the smart.
Let me answer.
Matt Skellman said that's a smart answer. He's picking up what Juju has dropped on the floor. He's about the only one who's done so. But anyway, that's basically it on that. We'll see how things turn out in the offseason for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So peace.